Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you, Maurice, for this rewiring. Welcome, everyone, to our third roundtable, Outlook for Teaching and Practice. What was interesting about what Studio Basel was doing, looking from today's perspective, as practitioners, as also as educators. There was a specific relationship between research, education, and architectural and urban design practice. So Studio Basel famously kind of suspended obligation of a design studio to produce a building, right? I mean, this was in a way revolutionary. It was very, in a way, unexpected. I don't know if it contributed to the kind of popularity of Studio Basel, but it was a crucial move, to unlock the possibility of the work that we are discussing. There was also, as we heard, effort to construct a kind of a research approaches almost from scratch. We heard Mani, for instance, saying that, using the notion of fundamental research, somebody used the word autonomous. It was not a coincidence the Studio Basel was in Basel and not in Zurich. Also, Roger remembered Marcel, who insisted on the idea of a kind of a garage workshop, let's say, or something very authentic and individual. And in doing so, Studio Basel produced research that also changes, I think, or reflects in a very, very important way, in a way that we approach design, for instance, in teaching. And at the same time, this opens a kind of a broader discussion about teaching and pedagogy in a contemporary architectural school. So it is interesting now perhaps to discuss about those questions. What were important elements of Studio Basel's teaching, and how do we look back at this relationship between teaching, research, and practice? How did it impact your own work? So now in the panel 3, we will start with Roger. Roger Diener, thank you so much for being here. So the first question goes to you. What were these special and important elements of Studio Basel's teaching?
Yeah, we heard a lot today, and so much is really true what was said. And something that maybe was not so clear until now is at what extent it was really edgy in different ways, that teaching. That means that, as Christian said, at the beginning, it was the question at urban Switzerland. But that question, it was every time many questions. And from the very first moment, even before the students came, all of us, we started to know about some preparation work. There was every time a very careful preparation of a different theme. But as a matter of fact, we were facing the students and we didn't know ourselves. And it was also, I guess, different than a it was not just because it was not research and not teaching, but I mean, there is a lot of research that goes very clear directive standards. So, and that was not the case. We, while working, researching, to say so, we were also looking for those issues and for those kind of every time different standards to reach within one work. And the students were, I think, quite aware that we didn't know ourselves. And also more, all the assistants from the very first day, they knew that we didn't know more than they did, you know. And I think that created an incredibly interesting atmosphere in this studio from the very first day, and it didn't change when the students came. And quite often now I can also rather speak about that time that we split in a way already, and Marcel and me and the whole chair, very often we were facing those students, and we didn't know ourselves really where it would end, how will we go on. And I think that must have been an interesting experience for the students too, not only for us in the chair, I think. And that, I mean, also the field work. I'm sorry, Manuel, that today it seems but it might change once more again. It seems difficult, but that was so great and incredible what those students experienced while they did that field work, and while all of them, and even we as students, if I remember well, or then also as traditional design teachers in Lausanne also, experienced those trips that you are more visitor, and it might be a difficult week because you have seen so many things were shown to you during those trips, well organized by the chairs. But that fieldwork was the inversion of that. It was that the students didn't know really where to start and what to see, and it was not so spectacular, the theme. They had to, when it was also within this age of city and agriculture and all those issues. And I think so this was really also physically an important and interesting experience. And the other thing is, of course, what has been said different times, that they were facing those processes of those social processes, those economic processes, ecological processes, and all those issues that they became really relevant for what finally still in every work and in every one of us remains, that wish that something becomes a kind of also of a formal identity or of a gestalt or so. So I think this was really an extraordinary experience for each student, but it's not an outlook at all. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's only a testimony.
I mean, I can't turn it into an outlook, but I can simply say that I believe it would still be very, very provocative to have a design studio in which building is not an obligatory result. And I think also I have to remember that fieldwork in Studio Basel was 2 weeks plus 3 weekends, so these were extraordinarily long trips. So, going to Nile Valley for 2 weeks with students, or going to Havana or the other places mentioned, I mean, these were, let's say, substantial efforts, right? Which included, ethnography, kind of exposure to sort of various influences, making contacts and so on. And we also had a kind of a extraordinary privilege as assistants to work for a full semester in preparation of that trip, right? So these are 3 sort of, I mean, if we look in terms of rules, I mean, those things are just not doable nowadays at ETH, or we would need something equivalent of a kind of department's revolution to make that happen. Again, right? But okay, I mean, I think it's an interesting discussion about what could be gained and what could be lost, right? And I think I would need. I'm very much, let's say, in favor of these arguments, but would need a lot of your help at the department's conference. But Christian, would you like to follow up?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there is one aspect that should also be mentioned here. It's, I mean, for the students, some of the students I met later, they looked back and said this was for them a really very valuable experience. No, it was really a great chance to have this opportunity to be immersed. No, they were immersed into a totally different context. And we have to say that in the really successful studios, it was always a cooperation. It was not always possible in the ideal way, but in the best studios, it was a cooperation with students from the other places. So, and there, of course, this was a really great moment of learning for both sides. So I think that aspect, and that's also a key aspect, if we discuss about, kind of a post-colonial approach to urban studies and to do research, I think here, I think that shift also from learning from, is, I think, today, it is a kind of common learning. No, it's not learning from. It is also a point to take serious, and that's still a problem. I mean, to take serious the researchers and the practitioners in all these different places, in South Africa, in Havana, and so on and so forth, that they have a voice, that they are also recognized in this Western type of academia. So I think that's a key point that today is, I think, in the forefront. But I mean, to come back to our discussion here, I think Simon Hartmann, I mean, you are also one of those assistants and senior assistants, actually, senior researchers at Studio Basel, and you are now a professor. You have your own, of course, your own architectural enterprise. So, what are you doing with these experiences that you collected in these years? What are you doing with them in your actual practice?
I didn't like so much my studies, especially the end of the studies. It was kind of too much just people who tell you what's right and wrong and what's good style and bad style. So I consider myself also, like Ying, a product of Studio Basel on the level of, that was like a second wind for me. This interest in whatever comes in front of your gun is something which I think was really beautiful. And this is something, of course, I would like, or I try to get across with my students now. Jacques said before, things happen in groups. I think this was your phrase, no? Or interesting things happen in groups. So, and I also realized today how much our early days of being just the 4 professors, Emmanuel, and then when Emmanuel could not reach the bulbs anymore, I came in, and then someone had to take the minor tasks from Manuel because he was like at the table. So then we were just the 4 of us, and no, we had not this luxury of one semester preparing and then doing the other. So we were just with that group, then with that. So each one had the feeling that, hey, why are you still doing something for the other 2? But it was beautiful because, and I think this is what I miss here, it was not each one gave his opinion. It was 4 very different people. I don't think that the people in Berlage were so much more different. But I think the really interesting thing was that these 4 guys and whoever then was not of the kind of original OPs or original professors said, I mean, they did the same drawing. They were not doing each one its specialty, but they corrected, Marcel trying to do the Brache, and the others who said, no, this is not an elk, this form is not good. And I think this is what I miss today, honestly, also, that it's just too much, like not back and forward. And I also think this is something which, unfortunately, you guys at a certain point stopped and said, we now split up to be somehow more efficient, but also to leave behind that spirit of just fighting for a common thing. And I think this is, in the end, for me, what I try to get across to the students, like with the handicap slogan, nothing about us without us. No? This is true for any little village, for any little site, that everything is worth to come with the big gun of trying to understand, and trying to understand not only that place, but a bit about the world while looking at this. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. Yes, there is probably more to be said about professors working together, about this kind of the 4, right, as a kind of important, let's say, dynamic or a kind of a balanced figure, let's say, in some way. This is also something that we can rarely, I think, replicate today, or this type of collaboration in teaching. But we have with us also Ligia Nobre, and we will continue now in the next couple of questions with basically a very similar reflection, right? So what was interesting and also critical, perhaps, about Studio Basel's teaching? So your perspective, Ligia, is different. You are from Brazil. You are working across disciplinary boundaries of art and architecture, and have always done that. Also, when you were in the studio, it was a Nairobi project, right? And as somebody who looks, let's say, from Latin American perspective, from Sao Paulo, from experiences in teaching in that country, how do you see the work of Studio Basel today?
Well, thank you first for the invitation, and I'm really glad to be here 16 years later. It's allowed. I shouldn't tell no.
You haven't changed a bit.
I haven't. Yeah, I think it was really important. I was at Studio Basel from 2000 for a very short period, 2007, 2008, exactly for the Nairobi research. And I understand now, I understand it was a pivotal moment. And for me, it was very important and interesting. I was grown up in São Paulo, But then I took my master's in London at the Architecture Association, and actually my thesis, my dissertation was about the design research laboratory at that time was Patrick Schumacher, Brad Steele, and he was a critique of the process and the pedagogy of them. And then I went back to São Paulo to open up a non-profit platform working with artistic practices on urban and political issues with a very international, and then the first residency art program in São Paulo. Why I'm saying that? Because I learned very deeply with my own body, and to deal exactly with like doing artistic research, architectural research, urban research, joining artists and sociologists and urbanists from different places and dealing all the time with this collapsing of ecosystems, of perspectives, of perceptions, and also being in São Paulo and working internationally and locally, feeling also, of course, it's we are at the border of this Western world somehow. So you have a colonial process there, and then you have this kind of situation of Europeans coming and North Americans, and they want just to know and extract and take it away. But we do that inside Brazil itself, in different territories. So for me, that was a very critical point when I joined Studio Basel. And then it was great that Shadi and I were joining at the same moment. And Manuel was just there for 1 or 2 years. And then we doing this, the whole process, it's such a privilege that ETH and Studio Basel had of having like 1 semester of doing research, this preparation trip, going back, this time with the students, and the whole process of discussing with Jacques and Pierre every week how we should go. For me, it was very interesting because there was an experimental dimension there, very free, but also rigorous. So I think one of the main legacies or learnings from me, it's, the pedagogy of describing. It was also paying attention on which kind of perceptions you come from one place and you find the other, and this collapse, and then of course coming sometimes with a European perspective and listen, this doesn't work here. So even like the drill holes that was so famous within the studio, Nairobi was like a moving, collapsing ground. If you try to do it, it would just, operate in a different way, and then you have to open up to other kinds of methodologies and processes. So I see it much more as my own practice, but that very moment as a learning with, and I think it was key that we really collaborated with the University of Nairobi, with a teacher there, with a professor there, with many other people we contacted and build up trust. That was very important, and with the students. So ETH high students were working and doing research together with the architecture students from Nairobi. And even like the resources, that we have. I remember like pay attention, listen, we're going to pay the professor there. We have, bring the names of the Nairobian students to the publication, because for them might be a huge difference and not to an ETH high student. So these small details that I think they're also pedagogical, in a sense they are political, that they can change people's lives in different ways. And I think we had much fun. We worked together in a really amazing way, and we became friends closely even after such a long time. And so I think this sensibility, and I brought actually Studio Basel the first time I was teaching. Afterwards, I kept working on curatorial research projects, but also teaching in São Paulo. And I see totally bringing some of these processes with my students there, and driving more and more now the attention how can we have the university as a platform to do research, but also to change concretely, conditions. So I'm now, for example, currently involved in a project in Amazon, south of Amazon, with international and local universities, but working together really closely with really local indigenous peoples and being affected by an infrastructure process. What that means that, okay, we're bringing out these cartographies, but also bringing back to the territory in concrete ways, in different tools. So I think Studio Basel was an important key moment for that. And the websites I coordinated, and I'm really glad to see that's
yes, thank you.
similar. Thank you.
So thank you for the idea of learning with. I think it was very much the kind of ethos of that effort. There was effort to create a certain reciprocity. This is not easy, but I think those networks were very strong. I think these publications were also. And even I would say this open access effort is, I would somehow see it also in that context, right? It's sort of really trying to make the work available and accessible. I would like to go to Shadi Rahbaran. You were also in Studio Basel for several years. Some of your main cases were Kolkata and Nairobi, and you worked up to the research phase, the metabolism of cities. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think metabolism of cities was one of those themes that was not mentioned explicitly on the panels. Today you have your own practice, and you are also professor at the University of Applied Sciences and Arts in Basel. So how does Studio Basel, let's say, echo across your, present practice?
Yes, thank you. Maybe I also just mention, kind of go back for a second, that I also came to Studio Basel, because Manuel gave me a phone call. I was just back from Cornell. I had this opportunity to teach there for a semester. And before that, I had worked for a while at OMA, so a whole kind of a different maybe approach also to things. And I also was interested about this whole idea of the approach of, Studio Basel. So when I joined Studio Basel, I also discovered, just to go back, just to explain that before I say how I apply it or how I try to apply it to my own work and also at the university, was that I also had to discover this distinctive method of teaching and working, because we had to learn it in a way as new assistants, let's say, so that we could have a knowledge transfer for the students. So we also kind of, in a way, maybe modified some of these tools. And my first really eye-opening and influential experience in my work and teaching now was actually Nairobi. We keep all talking about Nairobi because I think it was also very special, the field work and the investigation. And with Ligia and Manuel, we went there twice, as you had mentioned, twice 2 weeks. And later on with Jacques and Pierre, which was also very exciting. And this kind of changed my view of looking at cities, kind of like forever and ever, like eternal, kind of like the gun thing. I don't know if that was a good thing you said, but I would take out, yes, exactly, the gun thing out, but it really kind of, made us to look at kind of physical, urban, and social culture. And I just want to say, so we had done the whole thing, before we left. We had done the drills, we had done the maps, the data, we had done a selection, we did all that stuff. But then when we arrived there, for me, things were really different. And that's why we all have to travel, that was mentioned. And we, as students, we also have to go there, but also as assistants. And I think we just went out there and we exposed ourselves. We became kind of like detectives and investigators. I still see myself as an investigator, by the way. And we were trying to solve all the cases, no? Like detectives, and our cases were the drills. But then we also realized they don't, once we were there, things were very specific, but also different. So the topic of difference and specificity and all these things that were mentioned today, in a way they popped up. So that was kind of a way to do that. And what we did also that I still really do, and I find it very valuable, was asking questions. No, we talked about that today, and I actually think it's quite difficult to ask the right questions. You know, it's not so easy. You know, we all ask questions, but kind of choosing the right questions. So, for instance, at the university, especially because we are at a school where we actually learn how to build and design and do construction and constructive kind of methods besides other methods. Asking a question is very important. And for instance, just to be very specific, because we speak very generally today, also the students before a crit have a pin-up where they literally have to have one single question where they have to kind of apply to their project. You know, and then first you think it's quite easy, but it doesn't necessarily work. So that's something that I still use also in our practice. We use that, the different filters of living, moving, eating, celebrating, I don't know, festivals in different places. These filters we also still use, and this kind of gives a multi-dimensional image or picture or a snapshot of a city. So that's also one idea. I kind of really try to be a bit specific about these things, and also collaboration with other universities, which we did with Harvard, GSD, and the Nairobi students actually on site. And also still we believe in our practice in diversity, kind of the potential of diversity and differences, because they just exist. We also talked a lot about that. And maybe the method of design, I think all of this analysis, if you really do them rigorously at some point, they actually emerge and become sort of a design themselves. That's what we always had to explain to the ETH students. You know, we do this analysis, and then through this reduction, iteration, there are certain kind of subjective and analytic things that come out that become actually design. And it's the same if you do a building or if you do design a park. And we also very much still look at the built and unbuilt. This is something that really had an impression on me, you know, how to deal with the unbuilt. And I, just to end this also, I think we can also, you know, so much learn from other cities that you can also have an intervention with students at a place or do something. You know, the open spaces, the public spaces, let's say, of Brazilian cities or Sao Paulo influence us so much that we actually, with our students, we put an access ramp in front of the Architecture Museum in Basel to say, you know, access for all. And this was literally also something that came from the whole Studio Basel experience.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
The ideas are still alive.
There,
right?
yes, there. You know, with Manuel, actually, we went to Kyoto because we looked at the metabolism of the cities and food in Basel and in the region. And this interested us so much that then we went to Kyoto and, you know, looked at the eldest culture of kind of the food chain, no, and the production of food. And basically, you know, we all kind of, I think a lot of us take this, all of this in our practice and in our teaching.
I'm really eager to hear something critical now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a joke. Just a joke.
So, I mean, let's come to. We are already in the overtime. So maybe I continue with you on Schmidt. I think that fits very well in this series, and then we will end with John Palmesino. So you will have the last word, So you were for a relatively short time in Studio Basel, and you were part of my team, because I mean there was always the team of Jacques Herzog and Pierre Demeron, the team of Marcel Mailly and Roger Diener, and okay, at a certain moment I also had an own team, and that made then a very special turn. But so you were at that time at the beginning of a research project that we were somehow designing and experimenting with, which was strongly based and fully anchored in this Studio Basel kind of experience. And maybe you briefly tell us how that was for you. It was a kind of comparative, it was the first trial to make a real comparative research between, in that case, big cities, large metropolitan territories, and we started with Mexico City and Kolkata and Paris.
Yeah, well, thank you for the invitation. I joined Studio Basel 15 years ago, and I've been there for 13 months, I think. And my background is in architecture. I am a trained architect, and I came from the Shrinking Cities project, where I was drawing maps for exhibitions, and that was kind of the entry to Studio Basel, the mapping. I joined the project Patterns and Pathways of Urbanization, where we looked at global processes of urbanization, as well as at the case studies that you just mentioned. And our tools were mapping, of course, and also socio-geographic knowledge. And we were rather interested in how processes manifest themselves in the physical world rather than the spaces itself. Lefebvre's theory and the Ordinary Cities book by Jennifer Robinson that have been mentioned before were kind of theoretical points of departure, and for me personally that combination of tools did not so much provide me with a tool set, but much bigger, with a kind of new mindset actually. And in my view, Studio Basel had a great impact on shifting the focus away from the popular subjects at the time and to subjects that still matter today. And by analyzing the context before proposing an intervention, kind of like inventing the intervention, which is still valid today. So topics were touched that we talk about 20 years later, and also the method of integrating the physical topographies with the social, the economic, and the theoretical frameworks is kind of has become kind of a given today. And so I'm not, I was trained as an architect, and I briefly taught as well at a university in Munich. But today I kind of work as in this mediator position between funding. Like I work for a private company that works for the public mostly, and so I work with small cities, and I'm kind of in charge for distributing funding that goes to renovation projects, and all of the projects have to address the climate crisis as well as social integration, and then also another project I work on is circular construction. We work with a foundation that invests in or created a research program on circular construction, and so I find that like this mindset I was provided with, I kind of employ in my daily business, and also that's also basically how architecture has changed from like the newly constructed buildings to more like refurbishing and circular ideas, and I kind of trace that back also to my time at Studio Basel.
Great. Yeah, I mean, It's always amazing how you can somehow transfer experiences, if they are really experienced, into very different contexts. And I think it's amazing how rich let's say the reach of possible experiences at ETH Studio Basel was. So you could learn a lot of different things, no? And I think that was precisely the quality. I mean, this openness, and that was also what then led to all these kind of inventions that we did, no? So I think that was a unique, for me, this was a unique moment. Which is very rare, and which was really only possible because of this very experimental kind of design of the entire Studio Basel, and all this, also this very, let's say, temporary. No, it was at the beginning. It was okay. Yes, it's a pilot. No, so the president came. Okay, I give you one professorship for 4 professors, and we show what you can do with that. No. And then it became an institute. But I think that that was this very special kind of experience.
2 professorships.
2 chairs. Yeah.
At the beginning, it was 1 chair.
No, it was always 2.
It was 2 chairs.
They told you.
Okay. Okay. It was 2 chairs. Okay.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have enough money to live.
Yeah.
That's true, yes. That's a good one.
Well, okay, I think we... Yes, we come to the last contribution. John Palmesino, I mean, when you arrived at ETH Studio Basel, you were already an accomplished researcher. No, you had already a lot of experience, and you had already quite the baggage of publications and experiences. And so you came to Studio Basel. You still somehow you worked on the publication of the Swiss Portrait. You played a key role in that publication. You then played a key role actually in designing so in the Naples project. So how can you do some research with students in 1 semester in a city that nobody knows? No, how is that possible? And okay, then you went further. You are now in London. You are a professor at the AA. You have your own company. You are working also as an architect, and so. Somehow it is like a trajectory. You came from somewhere, you went through Studio Basel, and now you are at a different place. So what is your kind of conclusion out of that trajectory?
Well, I was only 30. I was not accomplished at all. I met Jacques in Milano, and we had a very nice discussion about whether the wine that we were tasting was worth the price. And I think we sent back a few bottles because we were not happy. And they were not expensive. But the interest that that discussion rose in me was about aesthetics. The meeting in Milano was, for me, rushed because I had to come back from another meeting in Kassel, where we were working with, this was 2002, we were working with Okwi Envisor and his team at Documenta, and we were setting up an installation, let's call it like this, about something that was really disquieting for us. And that was the fact that in spite of full visibility, in spite of everybody knowing exactly what was going on in the Mediterranean, yet no one was acting. And I think this was, for me, a disquieting moment, because, of course, we are all told that you have to be enlightened in order to act more carefully, and that the entire notion of knowledge that comes with visibility, with scientific method, suddenly would almost automatically lead to good action. And the discussion about the wine was really interesting in that moment because, of course, I just came back talking about the major shipwreck in the Mediterranean, how come everybody knows about this and nobody knows how to act on this. And still we are 23 years later in a similar situation, but just escalated. The discussion about the wine was interesting for me because it made me really understand how the question was one of aesthetics. And that is how to become sensitive or sensible to a phenomenon. And when eventually I came to Basel, I thought that this was really where the condition of the city or the condition of the city could encounter a territory. A territory is the locations, is the relations to what keeps you alive, and you want to keep things away from impinging on them. It comes from terrere, not from terra. No, it's really nothing to do with this American idea that it's a big land extension. It's a moment of aesthetics. Don't come here. It's a message. And the questions that Jacques, Pierre, Marcel, and Roger and you were asking, to me, were extremely interesting as an aesthetic. It was a moment of scientific aesthetic, from your perspective, bringing the precision of the human geography, bringing human geography scientifically to a new way. But the question that Jacques was most importantly asking was the threat of beauty. And to me, threat is exactly that territorial moment. No? What is threatening? And it was sort of an inversion. You know? Suddenly, beauty is not what you aspire to, it's what threatens you. Napoli is such a beautiful city, but it threatens its capacity to articulate civic life. Paris is encapsulating the notion of beauty, no? Almost as an incredible perfection, extremely hierarchical. The possibility of asking how that beauty was a threat, I thought was the first moment of aesthetics. The second was your scientific one. But the third one, which was, for me, the political one, was the most interesting. Aesthetics always comes in three ways. It's not only how you are becoming sensible to elements, but you also have to gather in order to act on them. And that's the political aesthetics. And I thought that Studio Basel was specific, no? Not because it studied specificity, but because it had managed to bring this disquiet about what was happening to an idea of action. And there's something that you said, I think, Christian, at the beginning, there's a map that is never published. And that is how Switzerland is. No, it's the structures of the statistics plus all the Bohrungen, plus all the wiggly surfaces. But the one that was published was the Urbane Potenziale. Now, what is interesting, and this is, I think, what is specific about Studio Basel, is that it combines the aesthetics of becoming sensible, or you can also imagine the sensuality of the city with the political dimension. The urban potential is both how the city is and how it could be. It's a sort of impossibility because it is either or. And this is a really interesting condition, and it's really the turning point in our work at Territorial Agency, in understanding how there's no longer any possibility to distinguish science and politics, or art and politics. Really sensible, the condition of being becoming sensitive and all trying to sense where we are is the crucial element. So Studio Basel for me was this moment of inflection in understanding largely my preoccupation with the Mediterranean city, but of course the conditions are similar everywhere. The disquiet, I think, has done nothing. It has just increased. I think that the interesting element that we've heard many times today is that, yes, we have this incredible form-making capacity deriving from the methods and the tools and the beautiful meetings one-to-one with things that we didn't know, but there's still a disquiet. There was still some unease about what is happening. And I think this is really, for us, the work that we are doing now, it's really a slightly different question is not what are the forms of the city, but how heavy is the city? And the dimensions, the magnitude of contemporary human-made structures is now of a dimension that is unparalleled. It's similar to 30 centimeters of rubble everywhere, if you count all the elements that's keeping humans alive. And that is the disquieting, because it's your progress that you keep alive. And you are repelled by it. It comes back to you. And this is the territorial dimension. A territory is this drama. And then, but the real, I think, lesson that I learned, I didn't teach much at Studio Basel. Manny and Simon and others were dealing more with the other side of the glass. The lesson I learned is really that how to avoid then the tragic dimension in that. Now, how do you avoid in that moment of the territory to be both loyal to your city and to your peers and to the rules, or to the conditions that are about to kill you? And the difficulty was really the subtlety of people like Roger, Marcel, of course, Pierre and Jacques, in outlining so simple, clear distinction about spaces that people would just overlook. But that is the subtlety of aesthetics. And I think this is, for me, the biggest lesson, really. It was never a tragic condition. It's never an opposition of two. It's always a subtlety. It's a minute inflection, exactly like when you're tasting wine. In tasting wine, it's just, you have to become sensible to the wine. And the more you taste, the more you learn. It's not the other way around. And today we heard a lot, you have to look a lot in order to learn a lot. No, it's never like that. You have to learn how to become sensible to what you're faced with. And this is, to me, the big treasure of that weird encounter in Milano that evening after a fantastic lecture by Jacques.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's a great closing comment. I don't have to add anything at the moment, so.
It's impossible to summarize. It was very rich. I think after so many years, it was. And I think when we were working on this project, I thought sometimes perhaps I doubted, and I thought, wow, can we really pull it together, and will there be energy? And maybe studio is something that has dissolved, but. This event shows that it hasn't, and that there are fantastic ideas on many levels for research, for teaching, for practice, for the kind of moment of urgency where we are in. And so I'm very happy that we managed to make this open access archive. I wish you a good time using it. Thanks a lot. Yeah.